Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hello, Justin Daniels here. I am a corporate M&A and tech transaction partner at the law firm Baker Donaldson. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by Ding, Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our new best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com.
It's Monday.
It is Monday. You are not as chipper and as exciting and energetic as our last podcast recording. You need to have more coffee.
I guess, well,
or some coffee.
That would assume that I ever drank it. Have you ever seen me have a cup of coffee in all the years we've known each other?
Nope. Maybe you should try. To try new things.
Really?
Okay, but let's bring it back to privacy. Today, we're going to have a really lovely conversation. We have Robin Andruss, who is the Chief Privacy Officer at Skyflow. She is a data protection leader and longtime friend of the IAPP with 20 years of experience in the privacy risk, audit, finance, strategy, and compliance space, including stints at Google, Yahoo, and Twilio. She holds a CIPP US, E, and M certifications from IAPP. Robin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jody and Justin. I'm so excited to be here. I've listened to your podcast and I enjoy the funny bickering back and forth.
Including the pre-show. You know, it just dawned on me, reading your intro, it's actually a really similar path that I had. I started in accounting, I did finance, I did strategy. Then I found myself to privacy. And I think we even share a former prior company at Deloitte together.
Mm-hmm.
All good fun paths.
But she probably has less bickering with her husband.
She might have less bickering. You're going to get us started though, right?
I will.
Okay.
So Robin, take us on a little journey in your career and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Similar to Jody, yes, I started out at Deloitte on the risk and assurance side, finance side. I, kind of moved out of that world since I didn't love being in spreadsheets all day long on a day-to-day basis. I really enjoyed working with customers and clients and kind of learning about their business and their business model, but didn't just love kind of, being engrossed in budgets and forecasting all day long. So being in the San Francisco Bay Area, ended up finding a role that sounded really interesting at a company called Trustee at the time, which is now TrustArc, where I would work with top chief privacy officers on their privacy practices and programs following kind of the established Trustee framework at the time, right? They had COPPA certification, they had Safe Harbor. And, I think, right, when you start your career, you think, oh, I'm going to be this, I know there's a lot of lawyers, right, that went out there, I want to be a partner of a law firm, and maybe they kind of shifted their career into something else. When I kind of found privacy, or privacy found me, the interesting thing was that I remember Googling, what is privacy? In 2008, when I started at Trustee, and it said the thing that was up there came up was the beacon settlement for Facebook, right? And a couple kind of FTC consent decrees. So that's an interesting tidbit. But as I kind of moved into it, I thought, this is really a relevant industry, even though a lot of people didn't know a lot about privacy at the time, right? I remember when, in 2012, right, when they changed the profiles to public. And if you didn't know how to go in and change your settings, all of that data you had would just all of a sudden be public. And thinking about how it really impacts people's individual lives. And now, we're seeing that proliferation of this 15 years later. So fast forward to my career, started out privacy trustee, and then from there moved on to privacy roles and privacy leadership roles at Google, Yahoo, then Twilio, where I was their data protection officer when I left, and came more recently, about a year or so ago, to a company called Skyflow, a data privacy vault delivered through an API.
Well, Robin, we'd love to hear a little bit more about what a data privacy vault is and what Skyflow does.
Sure. So I'm not sure. Do you remember kind of GDPR prep in 2017?
I do, and we're going to celebrate a birthday for GDPR here soon. Depending on I guess depending on jurisdiction, I could be entering kindergarten next year.
So I have a funny tidbit. I actually had a GDPR baby. I had a baby girl born May 10th, 2018. So I was the pregnant one asking all the engineers and product managers at Yahoo. I was like, please do all these privacy things. I'm pregnant, baby's coming. But the GDPR is going to kindergarten next year. For my daughters, the GDPR baby is going into kindergarten next year. But so just think about pre-GDPR, right? I mean, some companies had more established privacy programs, depending on what industry you were in, maybe like healthcare, fintech. But a lot of companies were at the time, you had to go and do a data map, right? For records of processing activities, you had to go find the PII across multiple disparate systems. So I remember sitting down with engineers and saying, this is what PII is. You need to help me find it. We need to identify it in the system and build a records of processing activities. And just thinking about, going through that exercise, whether you're working with a global company for GDPR or, then a year later, everyone had to do it for CCPA, even if you didn't for GDPR. And just learning about all the data sprawl, like all the PII sprawled across disparate systems and access unrestricted. And, then also there's the whole data breach component, right? Like if you have more data spread across different systems, you don't know the controls or access controls around that data as well. So when I heard about Skyflow, I thought, the concept of a data privacy vault delivered through an API, it's a simple to use product where you put your most sensitive data, and I say sensitive data in quotes because we let the customer define what that is, right? Whether it's personal data under the EU or it's something like social security number or it's sensitive personal data under CPRA, like we leave it up to the customer to define what they consider to be sensitive. But this data is stored in a data privacy vault where you can isolate, protect, and govern the data in a highly secure storage. And what is shared outside of the vault with other systems is different levels of anonymized or de-identified data, like redacted, tokenized. So you don't have the PII personal data proliferating in multiple systems if you don't hypothetically need to.
Robin, can you share maybe a use case example of how a company might have access or use that information like you just described?
Mm-hmm. So we do have I'll use a customer that I can actually quote. IBM, is one of our customers for their healthcare data, one of their healthcare data AI uses. So they actually, they obtain the data, put it into the vault from, let's say, like a healthcare organization, then they de-identify it so they can merge it and then provide run analytics on this data for like healthcare improvement purposes. That's kind of like an industry example. Another really, I think, more personal example is we also have, for example, a customer of who kind of helps just like people like you and me with online wills, right? And so like think about all the sensitive data that is in a will, right? And you might go do your will at a lawyer's office, and then it's on paper somewhere with like your kids' names, your social security numbers, your assets, your bank accounts. But think about, as the world becomes more digitized and this data becomes put in the cloud or on different databases, like at least you're not storing SSNs somewhere in an unencrypted bucket or like a CRM system. So that's another use case, is like thinking about it. If you were to build a fintech app or a health tech app, really thinking about the consumer facing use cases as well.
Very helpful and very fascinating. I like the example also of the small business use case.
I guess what's interesting from my perspective, as we talked about in our pre-show, is we now have what, 10 states that have privacy laws, so they continue to proliferate. And in light of this proliferation, what are the challenges that you see companies facing today from a privacy perspective, and how Skyflow can help them with that?
Yeah, putting on my privacy leader hat, there's a lot of challenges we have to face, whether it's, just keeping up what's going on with all the new laws, the new regulations, the new enforcement actions. Um, so, just take like really like when I think about Skyflow, like you're really thinking about like putting aside all the other things you need to do around privacy as well, right? Like cookie consent. Skyflow can really help you ensure that you're storing isolating and protecting the data, and ensure you're really storing it in a secure fashion, which I feel like if you kind of look at all the different regulations, right? They talk about privacy by design, talk about privacy by design and default, and really thinking about how you're building in privacy by engineering early on, right? Versus kind of bolting it on at the end.
We cannot have a conversation these days without talking about AI. I feel like it shows up everywhere, whether it's personal and people are talking about their cleaning robots, to privacy. And you were going to say something funny.
Or the chat bot that can impersonate me talking to my spouse.
There's that too. What I was going to ask is, where do you feel like AI fits in the work that you do on a daily basis?
Wait, is there a chat bot?
Is there a chat bot?
Justin speaking? Can you build like a copy chat bot of yourself? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more?
So my joke comes from, did you ever see the show Silicon Valley on HBO?
I have. It's been a while, but it's on my.
One of the episodes was two of the engineers who are always kind of arguing with each other, kind of like how spouses sometimes have interesting conversations. The one created his own chat bot to interact with the other guy when he would email him and text him, and the guy had no idea until he saw him doing it one day. So could you imagine being able to use a chat bot to impersonate you to talk to people if those were conversations you didn't want to have yourself? So I throw in the wife part just because.
You could be on the golf course right now, and we could just have like a picture of your head kind of like arguing with Jody, like bantering back and forth.
Yeah. You could. And there are tools today where you can take a video and put a picture in, and it's not actually the person recording. You can have the voice and the picture that is there. So that technology does, in my opinion, eerily exist.
And it's funny we bring this up, Robin, because one of my big concerns right now is whenever, say, you're going to do a wire, nobody should wire off of just an email ever. And a lot of times you want to call somebody, and that's your second method of authentication. But now with deep fakes and being able to, recreate someone's voice, now you have to really be thinking proactively as to what that second factor of authentication is to wire money to somebody, because I don't think you can just rely on voice here for very long anymore because of the evolution of this technology.
That's a really good point. Like when you're purchasing a house, I know there's a lot of wire fraud of like a deposit, and like how the real estate industry is trying to prevent that. And yeah, very good point. But I can go back to my original question. So Jody, as you know, so AI has actually been, in the B2B privacy space, kind of a conversation more, even in the past couple of years, right? Because there's that controller processor relationship. So really making sure if you're acting as a processor that you're not using your customers' personal data or personal information for product improvements or like certain contractual obligations that you're committing to, which might include like AI modeling and such. So it's an area I'd say the privacy industry has been touching on. As a privacy leader, like, AI, I feel like fits into the world that I'm in, really ensuring that me and my team and the company, we're doing the right thing regarding AI internally and externally, educating the team around best practices, building internal policies and practices around AI. And then I feel like at kind of the more global big picture level, like, I'm really excited about the different frameworks that you're starting to see around AI from the different regulatory agencies, and really thinking about it's more than just privacy, right? It's more than just the PII that goes into the model. It's around ethics, fairness, trust, security as well. And really, trying to figure out how to take control of this technology, hopefully, and build it in the right way, ethically and from a privacy and trust angle. So we'll see if that happens. But the privacy industry is on top of it.
You look like you were going to say something. No. Oh, okay. Off you go.
Oh, I'm allowed to.
You can speak now.
No,
It's your turn.
Okay.
Did you have a comment to say on the AI?
Actually, Robin, I wanted to ask you a little bit more of a follow-up question. Wow, I feel like I'm the one here who's responding. Okay, it's cool. So I guess, Robin, like with all of your vast experience that you've had with privacy, for example, one of the areas where I'm advising clients is depending upon your use case for AI, you have to be really careful where you're getting the data from. The chat GPTs of the world are scraping it all over the internet, and you may not be in compliance, for example, with certain privacy laws. And so I'd love to get your thought process behind how, as a leader, if you had to evaluate a product that your company may want to use or whatnot, how do you advise about balancing, hey, this AI is cool, but you know what, guys, the wider net we cast to collect data, we're going to run into a lot of different privacy laws.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one because with this recent AI boom, everyone is using the technology more and more and collecting more and more data. I mean, I think what we are starting to see in the industry is privacy, security, risk reviews, right? And then we're starting to see more kind of AI risk reviews built into those process, whether it's internally or externally. So really thinking about as you're vetting whether it's a tool you're going to use internally as a vendor, or even your team, just using tools externally, maybe for their own personal use, is really kind of looking at their practices and policies, how they're collecting the data, what they're collecting, what they're stating publicly, going through almost like a vendor privacy and security plus AI review to feel that, your customers you're using are really, following proper practices and policies around privacy data collection. Just, like you touch on data reimagined and really using data for the right purposes.
All about building trust. We like that. Robin, as a privacy leader, you have a lot of insight that you've gained and you've learned and you're able to apply to each of these other companies. And as privacy is booming, there are many other companies just putting in place privacy leaders. What would you offer to a new privacy leader as advice on how to get started and being successful in their new role?
Yeah, I think those are two questions because you are starting to see people like kind of learning how to get into privacy. So that's an interesting area as well. I think I'll kind of break that into two questions for you. I mean, I feel like the privacy industry has been in general pretty helpful in trying to help new people, get into the space, whether they're coming from security or, let's say consulting or law or, just really have this passion for the area of privacy, privacy engineering, privacy law. I just did actually a podcast last week with the IAPP and a security organization, and we gave some tips, but, we talked about reaching across the aisle, like reaching out to someone else and asking them for a phone call or, ask them to kind of talk more about their journey and how they got there. And then also I gave advice on, learn, right? Like when I wanted to kind of move careers from, like kind of the finance world into privacy, like I said, I just started kind of Googling things. There wasn't a lot out there at the time, but now you could, go on LinkedIn Live and learn like, what is privacy? What is data protection? What are the AI and privacy risks? How does privacy interact with security? I mean, sometimes this is really boring. Like if I'm folding my clothes, I'll like just put on like a YouTube video if I want to learn something new, but just really think about how you could learn, and learn about the industry on yourself alone. And then as you try to kind of enter the industry. Now, let's say you've been in the world for a while and you're a new privacy leader, or you've kind of shifted from another role. I would say to take some time for yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint, at this point. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, I mean, I think, one of the things that I've done in some of the programs that I've been part of or led is that we've really thought about kind of building a scalable privacy program, right? Because you remember there was GDPR, then there was CCPA, Now there's CPRA, there's multiple state laws. I like the concept of kind of thinking about it from like a holistic global perspective, right? There's these control frameworks and security and the privacy world. I feel like, if you can kind of think about if there's like one framework you can follow with different controls where you can map it and feel like I'll use DSARs for an example, right? Like every privacy regulation is going to have a data subject access right or a data subject deletion right. So if you put that deletion in properly, hopefully it fits as there's new laws going into place and you don't have to recreate the wheel every time. So that's why I say it's a marathon, not a sprint, is thinking about how to kind of, minimize your risk. Obviously, there's things you need to do immediately, but also thinking about the long picture view of where kind of these regulations are going and how to future-proof yourself as well.
I appreciate the tactical example, like those data deletion requests and things along those lines. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's what you're doing in your day-to-day life with all of your customers, right? Because the state laws that are coming and you're probably helping them build scalable privacy programs.
We are. It's interesting because you will still have companies who say, for example, I'm working with one right now. They have people in California, Florida, Texas, a couple other states that might not have any privacy laws. And they have to make the decision, what will they do for the states that don't require them to do that? But then if you build the process in place, if they choose to change their minds, or if those states kind of turn on, they'll be in a better position to be able to manage it. And you can't do all of the requirements at the exact same time. You have to be able to build prioritization. Even though we want to do all the things that we have to do. The reality is a company only has so many resources, both time and money and people and capability to put in place process. You have to start with what's most critical for your organization to be able to build from there.
Right. Maybe it's more of a triathlon. Triathlon instead of a marathon, because just with a marathon, you're just running and you just run more, and then you do your marathon. Where with
decathlon, it's a good example.
Let's say your swimming isn't as good as your running, so you have to swim more to be faster in that angle.
Well, I think it's interesting that the two of you bring up this triathlon or decathlon idea, because it kind of goes to what I wanted to ask the both of you. And it's this. So in my world, we're all waiting for the new SEC regulation on public companies that relates to cyber disclosure. And an interesting area of intersection that I'm always dealing with is where privacy and security overlap when you have to classify data and you're concerned about if the worst happens with a data breach. And so what I was interested from both of your perspectives is, how do you see privacy professionals interacting with management when it comes to, it's great we have a privacy program, great, we're minding that well, but how are we integrating that with if the worst happens when it comes to data breaches? Because I can still tell both of you, when we've gone in to handle a data breach, they don't have an incident response plan. They've never practiced. They're running around as a chicken with their head cut off. And so what role does that kind of thing play in a privacy program? Or is it more, no, we do our privacy program, that's really what these security people ought to be doing?
Yeah,
I can to Robin.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in the companies I've been at, privacy and security have worked really well together. I think, as you should have like a detailed incident response program and do, tabletop exercises and really make sure you're prepared when something like that happens. And the privacy and security leaders and legal counsel kind of work lockstep hand in hand to prevent something like that from becoming, a chicken with your head cut off situation. I would also say, I think it's the security industry. I feel like there's a lot of things we can learn from that industry because, right, they've been around they're more mature than privacy industry associations or more mature than privacy programs, and really thinking about how to, have kind of that incident response ready to go and execute on it as a team, not as adversarials. Jody, what are your thoughts?
I would add, for a lot of the smaller companies, they tend to have security in place first.
Yes.
And then they come and bring the privacy pieces in. And it's a little bit of a hurdle to get them to understand privacy is equally as important as security. They're different issues. And Sometimes it takes an incident to make that happen. Sometimes it takes the pressure of a sale or the competitive nature or risk of fines with more states coming on. And then they realize, oh, well, I don't want to be in trouble with fines. I guess I should start paying attention.
One last thing I wanted to ask the both of you for the benefit of our audience is this. So as we've talked about, privacy laws are proliferating. 10 states now have them. I'm going to ask you to wear two hats for this question. One is your consumer hat, and then one is your company hat. What are your thoughts around whether or how good an idea it is for state legislation to have the private right of action? That always seems to be a serious stumbling block, creates a lot of fierce conversations on both sides of that conversation. I'd love to get the perspectives of our two experts on the podcast today.
Still going to pass it to Robin first as our guest.
Okay. That's a tough one because I feel that, and this is widely debated in the privacy industry, if you don't have that, like that private right of action is more of like that stick that makes people really wake up and are really worried about doing, making sure they're actually, they know that the plaintiff's attorneys are going to come after them, right? So they are going to make sure they're following the law and they're more concerned about it maybe than say like a regulation that's passed where that there's really no one who can really enforce it. But then you see the flip side where, there could be too much kind of legal action with the private right of action. So balancing the two, it's a tough one in the US, I think. What are your thoughts, Jody?
So my challenge is I feel like you have plaintiffs' attorneys who will find every single little loophole, and a company might have really put their best foot forward and there's some little area that they were able to get in. You have big legal action, and then I feel like it trickles down to customers in a negative way with some type of increased pricing that could be reflective in insurance pricing across the board, increase regular pricing for whatever the product or service is. And ultimately, I don't actually think it raises the stakes for privacy at an individual level. I would rather see more fines and more enforcement at a regulatory agency body than have it be at a litigation level.
Yeah. And you think about CCPA and then CPRA, right? A CPRA, they actually put in place like that, the body that will actually enforce a CPRA. And so, they kind of enforce that law by doing it that way.
And I would add, I think the key to both points, or the points that both of you are making, is funding. You can stand up an agency, but if you don't fund it and give it the resources it needs to go out and enforce it, it's like you've created a toothless tiger.
Fair point.
Anyway.
Well, Robin, with all that you know in the privacy and security space, perhaps when you're out with friends, they might be asking you, what should I be doing to protect my data out in the universe? So what advice would you offer them?
If this was 6 years ago, I probably would have said, make sure you understand your privacy settings on like Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. I feel like people, for some reason, like have kind of gotten better at that in the last couple of years. So that's good. I'm not sure if the settings just became easier to understand or people became more aware of what they were sharing and how. I think it is kind of shocking on a separate note, like how many people might be using really simple passwords that can easily be hacked, or like multiple passwords across different sites, like one password across different sites. I mean, so think, really thinking about using strong passwords and maybe using a passcode manager like a Keeper or something, although there is the caveat, there was a data breach with LastPass. But, really thinking about your personal information. And then another one is, using a free credit monitoring service to know like how many accounts do you have? Is your credit still good, or how can you improve it? Because that, if you are hacked, and which is probably, there's other issues around privacy that harms, right, that could happen to someone. But I feel like, someone getting access to your personal and financial information is one of like the most severe you kind of have to like come back from and fix. So being aware of what's going on with your accounts.
Good advice.
So, Robin, when you're not leading privacy at Skyflow and you are looking for those opportunities to have Robin time, what do you like to do for fun?
I have two small children. As we know, I have a kindergartner and a first grader. So when I'm not chasing after them and enjoying time with them, I feel like my kind of like working out has been more like me time, like going to a workout class or going to a yoga class or like a hike or a nature walk or something like that, just to kind of, maybe listen to a podcast around privacy.
If that counts as fun, then that works. Robin, thank you so much for sharing all that you did today. If people would like to learn more or connect, where should they go?
LinkedIn. I'm the most active on LinkedIn, so you can look me up and connect with me. I like to connect with people. And then I am on Twitter. I can't say I post that much, but I'd say LinkedIn is the first place you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to put that in the show notes. And we're so glad that you stopped by to share all the insights you did with us today. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.